Welcome.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Hey, Chelsea.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
Do we want to give it another minute or two and see if we get anybody else?
How many people do we need for quorum?
We need 3, and we have 3, I think, with Jessica, Chelsea, and Scott.
Okay. Christine, you didn't already get the minutes done from the last DAC meeting for us to review?
Stop it.
What have you been doing all day?
Sorry, I couldn't take mine either. I didn't turn in mine.
Well, wait a minute, because it was an informative meeting. Are there supposed to still be?
No, there's not supposed to be minutes, but there should. Candace, I mean, theoretically, I don't know that we need, technically should review them, but Candace and Lori should, or whoever was helping them, should have captured the feedback and document it. But no, there won't be official minutes. You won't do official minutes, and we won't need to approve those minutes because it was not an official meeting.
Okay.
Which I'm bummed. That's the first time that's happened since like 2020. I just went to the school board and bragged about how great we were doing on Zoom and how we were getting great attendance and it was working so well. And then the next day, I don't have quorum. I'm like, seriously?
You should have knocked on wood.
Oh my goodness.
Especially since I was sitting right next to you, Scott. There's a forehead you could have knocked on right here.
Oh my goodness.
But what we have done is we've since sent notification to all of the principals who've had their participants at all meetings, and a separate notification to the ones who've been intermittent, and that some of those principals were unaware that their DAC representative had not been participating in the meetings. So they've all been informed, and we'll do another reminder to those principals.
But how disappointed the board members are that if we don't have quorum and they don't get our formal recommendations, and you can stop that from happening.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the executive DAC to order. And it looks like per the request of board member Patrica, we're looking at discussing the strategic plan refresh.
What is that? What is the strategic plan refresh?
So we have a strategic plan in place already, and with a new superintendent, it's important for us to take a look at the strategic plan and not completely change it, but refresh it. Typically, a strategic planning process is very time consuming, and it's a real deep dive into our data, where we stand, where we want to go. Really, it's the board's job to tell the superintendent what we want him to do, and he determines how it gets done. And so we're looking at refreshing the what do we want the superintendent to do. Does that help at all?
Yes, it does. Do we know if the superintendent will be doing the election for the position for next year?
He has not made any decisions from what I understand. And I would never speak for him anyways.
Understood.
Just unless he had announced it.
Yeah. I've not heard any announcements. And I will also tell you that, you know, with an elected superintendent coming in, some of what we're doing right now is perhaps even more important than in the past. And the strategic plan is part of that. So for example, you all have probably heard that we're looking at a guardian program in our schools, correct? Have you heard that?
Yes. Meaning armed personnel.
Correct.
Okay.
Armed personnel, not
Okay.
teachers, not teachers, capital N, capital O, capital T, not teachers. But one of the ways that we can ensure that the Guardian program is done in a way that makes parents and students and staff comfortable is through policy, making sure that we have strong policy safeguards in place. And the same is true for a strategic plan. You know, I'm an elected official, so I don't want to say anything bad about elected officials, including myself, but you never know what you're going to get in terms of qualifications or political ideology or political motivations, even more so. And so if we have a strategic plan in place that meets the needs of existing parents, students, and staff, then we have a better shot at that having legs when a new elected superintendent comes in, if a new elected superintendent does come in. Does that make sense?
Can I jump in a little bit here? So
Please.
when you think of the strategic plan in this particular organization, it encompasses more than just the academic side of the house, right? So the business services side of the house, they also have objective and key indicators that they'll use to measure the success or lack thereof of those indicators over time. So it's really about looking at the entire organization and our effectiveness measured against ourselves. In some cases, some objectives are, we compare ourselves to like districts, but the purpose really isn't to do that. It's to really see how you are performing against the goals that you've established for your organization. And so what Member Patrica is talking about in terms of the refresh, instead of rewriting all of those objectives and all of those goals in a completely new mission statement and a completely different vision statement, you may look at portions of it and talk about what needs to be adjusted along with the why it needs to be adjusted based on the new membership, the new composition of the board, as well as the new leadership at the helm.
So
And that is exact. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chair Hertz, but that's exactly where you guys come into play, right? Like, I don't want the board to be saying that increasing achievement gaps is, decreasing achievement gaps and increasing graduation rates are the two most important things we should be focused on, if there's something that DAC members think we should be focused on instead. And that's feedback, direct feedback I can provide to the board.
So when I Googled Lee County School District Strategic Plan, takes me to a webpage that's Envision 2030. And there's an Envision 2030 strategic plan that apparently was last updated in September of 2019.
Correct.
And it's approximately 7 pages of content. But
Right.
then
And
there's-
lots.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
There's
No,
some,
no, you go.
there's a page with like 5 hyperlinks, and is that where we would have to go to get the level of detail? Because I got the impression from Dr. Cupid McCoy there that there's a lot of detail and objectives that's clearly not in this like 7-page overview.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the detailed objectives are important as the overall categories are. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Cupid McCoy, but typically we provide the direction to the superintendent and he fills in those hyperlinks. I'm really glad you're sharing it.
I just want to be sure I'm looking at what I guess my concern or question for this to be productive is understanding at what level of granularity you're going to look to get feedback from DAC. I mean, the odds of changing these things are probably low, right? I mean, these are some pretty high level type of mission statements and statements. Talks about what is success, mastery of core subject area, social, emotional, and foundational skill development, and sustainability, and then success factors. They're all like one sentence, pretty high level. Here's key strategic objectives. Now, are you going to come back? Are we assuming that this presentation, and I'll tell you, Board Member Patrica, just personally, not on behalf specifically of my school, but I'm a little surprised that the key strategic objective initiatives in 2023 stopped at 2020. So I guess you do need a refresh. You have those.
May
you
I
have these
interject?
long-term. So if they only did 2 years for the short term, you should probably update it every 2 years. You do have these longer term objectives here, but I guess who would be doing this presentation and who's going to focus us in on what the board wants feedback on?
I'd like to respond to that.
Okay.
The information will be shared from the consultant who will be working with the board. And what this group meaning DAC, what we will react to is once the board provides some direction. I believe there's a retreat coming up very
Tomorrow.
soon to be held at the collaboratory. So the
Wednesday.
board is going to provide direction to the superintendent around what they would like to see change. Once Dr. Savage and the consultant puts that information together, that's what's going to come to DAC and we react to that. Because now we're reacting to what the board is directing the superintendent to do.
Right.
Okay. That makes more sense. My concern was showing a document like this to DAC. I didn't think was going to result in a lot of productive feedback. So I would hope it's more targeted. I will remind you that I think the best success comes from A/B type of presentations. You know, do you think this or this should be what we're looking at? Or here's our top 20 initiatives. Which of these should be in the top 10? That, you know, the more you can sort of direct folks towards what you're looking for, and that it's cabined, I think the more you get feedback. You can certainly ask for open-ended feedback, but when you get to lists of 100 things, our feedback tends to get kind of muddy.
I genuinely think, I mean, when I got the presentation, when the board received the presentation from Dr. Bernier and the consultant, I was excited at the prospect of bringing this to DAC because I believe that there are areas of significant contribution that you all can make. You know, you're sitting in a seat different from mine. I stress all the time that I'm a parent, but I can't unknow what I know as a board member, and I can't always just sit in the seat of a parent. You guys sit in that seat, and you can help me to understand whether these goals are realistic, helpful, even where we should be headed.
Okay.
So I'm frankly, I'm excited at the prospect. I think this is exactly the kind of thing DAC can and should be doing.
Okay.
Now,
Right.
strategic plans might not be as exciting to you all as they are to me, but it's one of my favorite things about being a board member is setting the strategic direction of the organization going forward.
Does anybody have any objections to that being the topic for the April 26th DAC meeting? There you have it.
Thank you.
Do you know who would be presenting that, Dr. McCoy?
One of two individuals or both of them, the external consultant and or Dr. Savage.
Okay, so he's sort of heading up that initiative for Dr. Bernier.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. I think the agenda looks reasonable for how you've laid the time out. And as always, we try to be a little flexible on that. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes from the last executive DAC meeting that were provided by Christine to all of us? Chelsea or Jessica, since you were the two at the meeting, I would appreciate a motion to either modify or approve from one of the two of you. Do you guys have access, or ladies have access to the minutes?
I'm pulling up real quick, just one second.
I could always share it for you if that would be easier.
That probably would be, thank you.
I'm happy to do that. Since Christine is so wonderful to give me access, it makes it easier to facilitate.
We also, for elementary, are missing our co-chair. Is this upcoming meeting our last meeting? So we've got two more, right?
We have.
So
two
should we
more.
re-vote on that position?
Yes, I've given that to Dr. Johnston. She knows, so that when you guys go into your breakout group, that should be the first order of business at our next staff meeting. It was supposed to happen at this last one, but we never went to breakout. So.
Okay,
And we
Thank you.
couldn't, we didn't have quorum.
Vote.
Meeting was my other concern.
right. Okay.
I move that we accept the minutes as they stand. I don't see anything that I think needs to be addressed. I think it all looks pretty accurate.
I can second that.
All right. Anyone opposed to approving the minutes as presented? Motion carries. I know I'm the opposite of Robert Rules of Order, but on Zoom I can see everybody and you all can speak up, so that way I'm instead of a bunch of ayes, I can clearly hear if somebody says nay, and then we could explore it, just to be clear. All right, and I think that takes us to board member. Wasn't it supposed to be? Oh, Christine, it's supposed to be comments. Board member comments, ma'am. Any comments from our board member, Dr. Patrica?
So I would like to ask about, is it on there? Strategic plan refresh, breakout groups. I'm not doing that. Okay, so I'd like to ask about the May meeting, because we have something scheduled for the May meeting, and I'd like to hijack that as well, if you guys will all let me. There was some discussion on our curriculum advisory committee Dr. Cupid McCoy, is that the name of it? So there was some discussion there. The presentation was about our book approval process and our book objection process. And I'm not saying those words correctly, I know. And it's also about parental involvement in those processes. And it is politically, it is a very hot button issue. I would like to stay away from the politics, which I know Dr. Hertz can do, and focus on the parental piece of this and how it plays out for parents. And yet another opportunity, I think, where we can get robust feedback from the members to guide staff in terms of how this process plays out and what the process document looks like.
Now, we're particularly, you're speaking primarily about, or you're not speaking primarily about textbook adoption though, right?
Correct. I'm talking more about library books,
Okay.
books that are in
Just so everybody-
libraries. Yep. And books that are
Are not in
challenged.
classrooms.
Correct. Or in classrooms, right. I don't know if you all have seen, this really is a big political hot button issue across the nation, not just in Florida, but particularly in Florida. I want this process to work for parents. We are constrained by the law. Number one, that's the number one thing that I think I'd like the group to understand from the very beginning. When I say the group, I mean the larger DAC group. Staff does a really good job of breaking down, this is what the law is. And because this is a law, this is how we're going to do it. But there is some wiggle room in that law or in those laws. And I'd like that wiggle room to work in a way that works best for families.
So there would be a presentation of both, here's what the legal requirements are, and then here's what the district's current or proposed plan for addressing this is, and then solicit comments or feedback on that.
Correct. And curriculum advisory will be making a recommendation to the board at the next, at their next meeting. And I'd like to see recommendations coming out of DAC as well. Understand that curriculum advisory is more populated by people who have expertise in the area of curriculum, which is great. I love getting recommendations from people who have expertise, but I also love getting recommendations from the people that will be impacted by the decisions that we make, and that's you all.
Thoughts from anyone?
To provide some additional context, the last meeting held by the Curriculum Advisory Committee lasted 2.5 hours. And this was within the last 2 weeks, just going through the process and allowing the public speakers who were there to speak on the topic to do just that. But I want to stress what Board Member Patrica already emphasized, which is viewing it from a different lens. Like from our world, we have a decent understanding of the law. And so the work that has been done is aligned with that. Sometimes it's not always as easy to change your filters, right? So what your perspective will bring is the purity, if you will, to the process, where here is the law, here's what we have, and you can help see what's potentially missing. From a parent perspective, here's what the law says or doesn't say. Here's what our process says or doesn't say. There's a gaping hole right here, and here's some possible suggestions to fix that. Again, when you're up to your eyeballs in it, you don't necessarily see all of those pieces. So this is a really good perspective, and you don't have to look at it through the lens of being a curriculum expert, because that piece has already been addressed.
You know, saying that, I'm looking back at the agenda for the April 26th meeting, and I am not seeing a line item for public comment from non-DAC members on agenda items. I thought at the beginning of the meeting, we normally ask for public comment on the agenda, and at the end, we ask for public comment on the non-agenda items. Even though to date, knock wood, or I shouldn't say that, we certainly would welcome public comment, but it's been, I think once in the years I've been doing this, I've had public comment. But when you mentioned that the curriculum advisory committee meeting went 2.5 hours, how long does their meeting normally go?
In recent years, about an hour, hour and a half.
Okay.
Prior to that, probably 30 minutes.
Okay.
And Chair Hertz, that is one of the reasons, frankly, why I want to bring this in front of you all, is because if you go back and you listen to the public comment at curriculum advisory, there's a lot of misinformation in there. And I think it's super important that a group of this size get the accurate information and then bring that information back to the schools. As important, Chair Hertz, as important as us gathering information and feedback from you is the sharing of accurate information back at the SACs in the schools.
Sure. So that then begs the question, or I would ask if Dr. Kim McCoy, if you could consult with Attorney Dupree Bruno or her staff as to what our obligations are towards public comment, what limits can be reasonably placed upon it, how long do we need to reasonably allocate for public comment. So as we look to structure that agenda, we should anticipate perhaps not just some public comment, but some extended public comment, which is not something we have traditionally had to deal with at this committee. And I want to be sure we understand how much time we need to or should allocate to that, whether that'll affect our meeting length, because our meetings are already 2 hours. And so we should, I think, and that's essentially really with zero public comment in reality, and we do tend to use most of the time. It's been the rare meeting where we've adjourned early. We have, but it's rare. So I would be, I don't want to say concerned. I want to be cognizant of that and make sure that we do what we're supposed to do, because certainly if we don't correctly follow those rules, this is the type of subject that will cause complaints and issues, and that is something I don't want to be the cause of if we can avoid that by having a clear procedure and following it.
Chair Hertz, the board's policy regarding public comment is followed by our committees. So there is very clear breakout. 60 minutes of public comment is all that's allowed. If you have, I think, over 20 speakers, I don't know the exact number. If you have 30 or more speakers, it drops down to 2 minutes per person. And then if you have above 30 speakers, it drops down to 1 minute per person. There's also a very clear statement in there about the kinds of comments that are permitted and the kinds of behavior that is permitted. I foresee this as being significantly easier to manage because it is via Zoom. The face-to-face meeting, if you watch it, you'll hear there were two sides. One side supported something, the other side supported something else, and they kind of went at each other when one side was speaking. And you can hear it in the background. On Zoom, we can mute everybody. So on Zoom, that kind of ruckus, ruckus behavior will not be allowed.
So it sounds like we're going to need to develop some mechanism to register people that would like to speak publicly, so that we're going to have a count of them, and logistically so that we can manage that and call on people. I know at a physical meeting, people fill out speaker cards and then you can count the cards and manage that. So we're going to have to, I think, talk about how to manage that for our meeting.
You can use the feature of raising the hand. for that.
Well, or you could use a Google form where when people enter the meeting, if they want to make a comment, they have to register on the Google form, and you have until a certain time to fill out the Google form. That way you would have a record of everybody's name and you could figure out how many people needed to do that.
I like that. And I think the board requires you to state your name. I don't know if you have to provide an address or anything, but I don't know what information. I know you're supposed to state your name. So again, that's stuff I think we should. I like the idea of the Google form, but again, I want to make sure we run it by the board's attorney to make sure that we're compliant with what's required. But I like that idea, and that will give us a count. I know Christine can see those results and give us a count while it's going on. So that will give us a better way to manage that.
Chair Hertz, may I also ask if we could consider moving public comment to toward the end of the meeting, and that's something we would have to check on with Attorney Dupree Bruno. And the reason I raise it is because I'm looking at your faces, and you're all so nice and you're all so sweet. And some of these comments can be very mean and very off-putting. And I don't want you to be in a space where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that guy just said that. I want you to hear the information presented by staff. I want you to have those robust discussions, and I want you to provide the feedback to the board. And then you can hear some of the less kind things that people might have to say on the subject. Am I making sense?
Jessica?
The other reason, if we're able to move it to the end, is because, as board member Patrica mentioned, there is a lot of misinformation out there.
Right.
If people have to, at least in theory, listen to the presentation and find out what really is there. And that was one of the things I wanted to say too about the strategic plan. I don't have a business background. So when I look at a strategic plan, I have some idea of what I'm looking at, but it is so high level that I'm not really sure as a parent what that means to me. And so that would be the other comment, both on the law and with the strategic plan. If it's possible to make sure that they're explained at a level that just your typical parent without a background in education or business can understand, that would be really, really helpful. And it might eliminate some of the comments where people are, and what I see a lot of is more like the questions, like, I don't understand this, or so maybe if we were able to move the comments to the end and it's explained at a lower level, for people like me that don't have that kind of background, it might help with some of the comments in the end.
Okay, I would suspect though that for public comment to be meaningful, it certainly has to come before any formal recommendations.
Yeah, you're right. As I was saying that out loud, I
Otherwise,
realized that was
if
the
we're
case.
giving our recommendations before we get public comment, then we've denied the public the opportunity to comment and inform our opinions, I would assume.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Could it just be at the end of like the discussion? Because I thought you were saying it had to be before the presentations. Isn't that how it was? Like, I feel like that was how it was the first meeting.
I said we normally do it that way. I don't know if it has to be before the presentation or before, but certainly I think it has to come before we discuss the presentation and before we provide feedback, and certainly before we provide formal recommendations, which we rarely do. We normally provide and collect all of our feedback and present it to the board. I think the board gets a lot more information that way, and based on the quarterly board updates I do and all the thank yous that our committee gets from the board, they seem to appreciate that. Whereas the few times we've done a formal recommendation, like they asked us about, do you want site A or site B for, I'll remember the letters wrong, high school NNN, then we've taken votes and done, we formally, DAC recommends you choose site A. And that's the formal recommendation. Formal recommendations, because we really, given the number of members we have and the amount of feedback we collect, I have avoided trying to, we would have to prepare this meeting would be us sitting here, taking all the feedback we got from the last meeting, trying to put it all together in anywhere from a 1 to 3 page document, right? This is the formal recommendation of DAC. Then we bring it back to DAC to vote to make sure that what we did was what all of DAC said, and that would be a formal recommendation. So I've definitely, for what this is worth, because again, I'm not going to do this forever. And I know Mr. Walbert, who said he was going to come after me, has missed like the last 2 meetings here. But I try to share some of my thoughts with y'all so that whoever comes next can try to maintain this. I'm really not going to be the chair of this committee for forever. But so I try to share those thoughts. So that's why I do that. That's why I love the jam boards. That's why I love some of this stuff, is that there's all this this detail. And then there's people around, there's staff in each meeting that if there's questions that it makes it meaningful feedback, which is why I use that term. And I avoid the formal recommendations unless we have things like the proximity plan or other things where there's a specific topic that we need to address that the board needs a formal recommendation on. For what that's worth, I don't, for Tricky or Ms. Patricky, you can certainly comment on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Scott. It's kind of like a hybrid kind of committee, and it's not a committee, it's a council, district advisory council, in the sense that you are providing feedback directly to staff. Staff is hearing that feedback and staff is implementing it. And typically it's processes and procedures upon which you all are commenting and providing your feedback. Processes and procedures are not the realm of the board. That's not what we do. That's, we've told the superintendent what to do. The processes and procedures are the how. So I think that's how you guys are most effective. Why? Because you're living with the effect and the outcome and how those processes and procedures work on a daily basis. I mean, that's your life. You're parents with kids in schools, and if something's not working, this is your opportunity to tell us. And that's really the kind of feedback I see coming out of this meeting, should we decide to go with this topic, is, well, I'm a parent, I have 5 kids in 4 different schools. How do you expect me to fill out all these forms? Or I looked at that form and I read it and I don't understand what this means. Could you make it clearer? Or why do I have to fill out a form at all? Or, I mean, those are stupid questions. Those are stupid examples, but that's, as the end user, that's the feedback I feel like staff needs, in addition to you guys bringing accurate information back to your schools.
Okay. With all that said, I think it's something we can accomplish if everyone's in consensus on that, and Dr. Gibbon McCoy can assist us with these questions we've raised about how to procedurally handle that meeting.
I just want to add, like, I'm okay with this being the topic, but we're really going to have to tread lightly to keep the politics out of it.
I doubt we'll be able to do that for the public comment. But it is what it is.
Yeah, we're definitely not going to be able to keep it out for the public comment. And that's why I said, when I look at you and I see your faces and how kind you are, I get a little bit worried about bringing that public comment in front of you. But I also know that there's real honest to God feedback that you can provide that will allow staff to put these processes and structures into place in a way that works for you. And that's really the point.
All right. Does anybody else have anything on this topic? Go ahead, Ms. Rude.
Just for clarification, I didn't know, I heard what you were saying about public comment sections, and I wasn't clear if I needed to add one in the agenda that's upcoming, or if we're just discussing it for the last DAC meeting of the year, the last of the year, not the previous DAC.
I think the question on the table, Christie, is that Chair Hertz referenced historically, at the top end of the agenda, you would have a place for public comment on agenda items for for agenda items. And then at the end of the meeting, or towards the latter part of the agenda, you would have public comments again for non-agenda items. That was my understanding of what he was saying. If you look at our agenda right now, it doesn't have the spot at the beginning for public comments related to agenda items.
Okay, I see that. So I do have it under Roman numeral 7 for the latter one. For the former, where would you like me to put that in the top?
You and I can talk about that offline.
Okay.
In between 3 and 4 is where it was traditionally placed.
Okay,
So we would get our comments, we would do our approval of the minutes, and then prior to the presentation, we would solicit the public input is how we traditionally did it. If you have different thoughts, open to discuss, Dr. Cooper McCoy can always reach out to me. That's how it was traditionally done.
My preference would be after the presentation, but before the breakouts for this particular topic.
For the strategic plan or for the,
Oh, no, for
Approval
the
process.
books. Yep, the book process.
that might make sense for the book approval process. For our standard meetings, does anybody, you have a preference?
Would it make sense in general to have it there? Because that way, if there ever is miscommunication with the general public, they've got an opportunity to hear the presentation before making decisions.
And it might also help with questions that they have, like that they want to, like something that's in the presentation that they want to comment on or ask questions about, if it's just right after the presentation.
My thought is the opposite, that if the public asks questions, it gives the staff an opportunity to respond in the presentation. My experience with public meetings, that's normally how it's done, so that those comments are out there, and they could be addressed by the person with the most knowledge, which is normally the person making the presentation or persons making the presentation, so that you sort of get that, and then the committee or council takes all of that in to make its determinations or provide its feedback. Would be, I see your point. You could certainly argue it either way, but you would be having the staff presentation, you would then get the public comments, then we'd go to breakout group and talk about them without any, it becomes very, I don't know. Do you then provide staff an opportunity to respond to the public comments? I mean, that's done. There are certainly, I will tell you, there are city council meetings where someone will come and make public comments, and one of the council members will call on staff to respond to a particular comment. Given our time limits and things, I'm not sure how practical that type of thing is. What are your thoughts?
I can see your point about allowing the staff to respond during their presentation time, so I'm okay with in general it remaining prior.
Yeah, I think either one is fine.
My opinion would be generally keep it this way, but for a topic that we know is extraordinarily controversial and people are coming in with their thoughts, maybe allow the staff presentation first and take their comments afterwards, because staff respond. It's just, staff probably is well aware of what those comments are from the previous meeting, and it's probably the same people making the same comments. So I think that's the book topic is more of a one-off topic than our normal topics.
Oops, sorry, that's my dog.
Are we preparing for a lot of general comment? Because I know we've handled other hot button topics in the past and still had nobody from the public show up. So is it?
The book topic is having a lot of people, if they came to the curriculum advisory committee, which doesn't normally get any public comment, that would be the reason to anticipate public comment at our meeting as well.
I know when we handled code of conduct in a time when the bathroom situation was being discussed, we didn't really have anybody show up, so I wasn't sure if it would be something that we could really anticipate being a discussion topic outside of DAC.
I think it's always better to be prepared, and I think Chair Hertz is correct. This is one of those items that's getting a lot of misinformed comment. I just want y'all to be prepared. That's all. I just want y'all to be prepared. I don't want your feelings to be hurt. I don't want you to run away and be like, I'm never doing that again. I had a different meeting on a different board where the public comment was just beyond. It was downright uncivil. Some of the comments And some of my colleagues were relatively new board members and they had never been subjected to that kind of thing before. And they were like deer in the headlights, just so taken aback. I'm trying to prepare you all is my point.
Okay. Do we have any more comments or thoughts on this topic? Does anybody have anything for the good of the order? So that was you reaching forward to speak, Miss Patrica.
Reaching forward to hit the leave button.
I will happily, I'll happily entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
All right, we will see everyone April 26th for our discussion on the strategic plan. And
Y'all
hopefully-
have a great night. Thank you.
You too. Take care.
Bye, thank you.
Hi, thanks.